What's going on, guys? Josh here from Momentum Productions, and today we're going to be comparing the Zhiyun Crane 2 and the Crane Plus. Which gimbal is better and which one is the right one for you? Let's take a look. Let's start talking about the Crane Plus. The Crane Plus is extremely similar to the previous version of the Crane, which is the Crane V2. We have a 5.5 pound payload capacity, which is capable of holding up a 5D Mark III with the 24-70 L series lens. So for those of you who are using a 5D, this thing can definitely support it. However, I did have some issues with clearance between the roll motor and the back of the camera body, so keep that in mind. Now, when it comes down to putting the Crane Plus together, we have a split design right in the center of the handle where we can install our batteries. When we install our batteries, we can screw on the included tabletop tripod and everything will start coming together. This unit is overall extremely solid. We also have an aluminum alloy design, which means that if you're shooting in a heavily humid area, this thing will not corrode. So when we're putting this thing together, the balancing process is exactly the same as the Crane version 2 and the Crane version 1. We have a plate on the top which slides forward or backward. We do not have a quick release plate on this system. However, you can attach one if necessary. Balancing can be a little bit tricky since I find that the sliding plate is not as smooth as the Crane 2. The balancing process can take anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes depending on your skill level. As for me, I can do it in under 1 minute. On the front of the Crane Plus, we have the control panel. We have a joystick, zoom toggle, power button, picture taking button, and LED indicator. The LED indicator will tell you the battery status. It will blink 4 times for full, 3 times for 75%, 2 times for 50%, and 1 time for 25%. The tricky part about the Crane Plus is you never know your exact percentage of the battery life, so it's always kind of a guessing game. The Crane Plus is rated to have 15 hours of battery life when it's properly balanced. The Crane Plus is also capable of controlling your camera's functions, such as picture taking and video record. It can also charge the camera while you're shooting. All motors on the Crane Plus use 32-bit encoders, and they all have 360 degrees of movement without any limitations. One big issue that I found with the Crane Plus is that if you slightly twist the handle, you will lose connection between the battery and the gimbal itself, so it will just shut off. I did not have this problem with the Crane 2, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. Let's jump back and talk about payload capacity. Now, I mentioned earlier that the Crane Plus is a 5.5 pound payload, correct? Well, does that really refer to wind resistance? The answer is yes. I was shooting out in Venice Beach, California, and I was shooting on the beach, the actual beach, and it was extremely windy. We had about 35 to 40 mile per hour winds, and I noticed that when I was shooting this model that you see right now, that when I was shooting in inverted mode, the Crane Plus had an extremely difficult time keeping up. It had issues with smooth pans. Now, payload has a lot to do with wind resistance, so keep that in mind. So even if you're not using, let's say, a 1DX Mark II, payload still does matter, because if you're shooting, let's say, out of a moving car or in any other windy environment, payload definitely matters. So don't forget to think about payload in that sense as well. Moving on to the Crane 2. The Crane 2 has a much bigger build, obviously for much bigger cameras. As Jason Vaughn likes to put it, this is the BBC, or the Big Black Crane. As I said earlier, payload capacity doesn't only refer to payload capacity, it refers to wind resistance as well. So when I was shooting in Las Vegas, Nevada, we also had high windy conditions. But this thing held up really well, especially in inverted mode. I didn't see any jitters or jumps in my footage. When it comes down to setting up the Crane 2, it is similar to the Crane Plus. With the Crane 2, we have 3 18650 lithium-ion batteries, which gives us about 18 hours of battery life when properly balanced. Now, if you notice the design of the battery compartment, it's fully integrated into the Crane 2 gimbal, meaning that it cannot be accidentally connected like on the Crane Plus. That on its own is a feature worth thinking about, and that for me is a deal breaker when deciding which gimbal to go with. Since the Crane 2 uses a basic Manfrotto quick release plate, it's a lot easier for me to balance the pitch axis when using that quick release system. The Crane 2 also has multiple 1/4-20" mounting ports, so you can mount things like lights, microphones, and other accessories as well. Yes, the Crane 2 is not as compact as the Crane Plus, but it does offer you many more features, such as a built-in follow focus system. The Crane 2 is the first gimbal of its kind to have a fully integrated follow focus system. As you can see here, I am using a follow focus system with my Sony A9. If you're using Canon bodies with Canon glass, you can use the integrated follow focus system internally using the Crane 2's firmware. You don't have to buy any external modules. The Crane 2 also has a built-in LED illuminated screen, so you can see real-time data of your camera settings and battery life of the gimbal. You can also calibrate and manage different motor parameters within the gimbal without having to open up the Zhiyun Play app. On the Crane 2, we also have a port on the side of the handle which allows you to connect a dummy battery so you can power your camera directly from the batteries of the Crane 2. That's not possible on the Crane Plus. When it comes down to ergonomics, I feel like the Crane 2 is slightly better than the Crane Plus. The thicker handle allows me to better grip the buttons and the joystick, and overall allows me to operate the gimbal a lot easier than on the Crane Plus. Now it's time for you to make a decision. Are you going to get the Crane Plus or the Crane 2? Well, as for me, I'm going to stick to the Crane 2, simply because of its modular design, with its built-in follow focus system, with its 1/4-20" ports where you can mount monitors, lights, microphones, anything that you practically want. This thing can do it, along with its heavier payload, which also makes it much more wind resistant. So this is definitely the gimbal for me. Also, it has a slightly longer battery life of 18 hours compared to 15. So if you're gonna hook up a follow focus motor or any other accessory that's gonna drain the gimbal's battery, you're gonna have more of a leeway, so to speak, when it comes down to battery life. When it comes down to height, they're about the same with the tabletop tripod screwed on. So overall, I'm sticking with the Crane 2 for my travel and professional shoots. So if you're interested in getting either gimbal, go ahead and check out the links for them in the description box below, and check out my Zhiyun Crane tutorial videos right here. I can't wait to see what you guys create, and I will talk to you soon. Stay cool. Yeah, stay cool.